really glad that you're here. I'm gonna give a little bit of time for us to be arriving together. But if you're already here, welcome. We are so glad to have you. Please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your pronouns, or you're zooming in from, and if you're a member of an organization. You really want to hear those things. We're very glad that you're here with us. Yeah, so if you missed what I shared about what you can put in the chat, excellent. Welcome, John and Natasha. We're so glad to have y'all here. Yeah, so please just put your name, your pronouns, where you're from, where you're calling in from, and if you're a member of an organization. Yes, and just a note that make sure you change your chat so that you're actually writing to everyone. We know that webinars can feel a little bit isolating, but we are actually all here together, and we get to see, yeah, other folks who are in community with us. Nice. We've got, I see Seattle, El Cerrito, Livermore. Wow, nice. Portland, Oakland. I know Tennessee, Kansas, amazing. Seaside, California, incredible. So glad that y'all are here. So I know that more folks will continue to join, and we are gonna get started. So my name is Megan. I am a white woman with shoulder length brown and silver hair. I'm wearing a blue hoodie that talks about all the things we want for everyone: safety, healing, housing, healthcare. I'm also wearing postage stamp earrings that are hand painted, and they are postage stamps of Gaza. And I am here as an organizer with CRCA. So I started organizing with CRCA in 2018 after witnessing over and over and over again how CRCA folks showed up in deeply principled ways, which I would later learn is rooted in the 5 methods from Community Ready Corps. And I'm still organizing with CRCA today because practicing the 5 methods in accountable community has fundamentally changed me as a person. So we've talked a little bit about like who's here. I see more folks coming in from Petaluma, from Denver, Vallejo. Awesome. So very glad to have you all. So there are going to be a couple more reminders in the chat. You'll see from Nikki. Thank you, Nikki. Make sure that you're writing to everyone. We want to make sure that everyone knows their webinar neighbors. So in CRCA, you may already know, but we begin all of our meetings and events with our meeting norms. And this is because CRC, Community Ready Corps, teaches us that the how we do things is often more important than the what. It's in the how we act and treat each other where harm is often caused. So we establish at the beginning of every meeting and event how we're going to treat each other in this space. And after reading through the meeting norms, we will ask each of you if you're willing to agree to abide by these norms today. I'm going to start reading on the slides, and then you'll see some of our other facilitators. You will also hear from my dog, who is squarely in this space with us. So first norm, Zoom. Please introduce yourself as you arrive with your names, pronouns, and where you're zooming in from. And again, make sure to select everyone when you are when you're putting something in the chat. Thank you. Yes, welcome, Cleo. 2, access is love. Thank you, Disability Visibility Project. We know that every person has essential skills, knowledge, resources, and talents to bring to the struggle. For this reason, we strive to make CRCA spaces as accessible as possible. Please send a chat message directly to hosts and panelists to let us know your access needs are met, or throughout the session about any access needs that you have by writing access in all caps. Please continue sending a chat message directly to hosts and panelists with access in all caps as your needs arise, followed by the barrier and access need that you have. CRCA volunteers commit to address those issues to the best of our ability. Sober space. Given the history of how the state has exploited addictive, mind-altering substances to undermine the struggle for Black self-determination, all CRCA-led spaces are sober spaces. We ask folks to arrive sober and refrain from bringing drugs or alcohol into the virtual space.
Respect each other. No hate speech, harassment, or abuse will be tolerated in this space. We uphold CRC's principle that we all have the right, the duty, and the obligation to claim self-defense as a human right. Move up, move back. We ask folks to be mindful of how much space you're taking up and how much you're actively participating. If you've shared a lot already in the chat, focus on listening. If you haven't spoken up yet, consider pushing yourself to share some thoughts. Practice education. We honor and respect the knowledge and wisdom of the people who've been most directly impacted by white supremacy and anti-Blackness. We assume we all have something to learn from each other as well. Practice organization. Remember that we need each other to win, and we can't organize people we don't love.
Practice contribution. This is a space to practice contribution over competition and control. So we don't puff ourselves up, we build each other up. Practice intervention. Each of us are responsible for proactively working to prevent and counter the persistent reestablishment of white supremacy. Practice divestment. White wealth is stolen wealth. Divestment is a healing and restoring practice that benefits us as much as it benefits the folks that we divest to. We commit to being transparent about what we have, why we have it, and what we're doing with it. Brave space. We embrace discomfort and principled struggle as pathways to dismantling white supremacy. We are, quote, willing to be transformed in the service of the work. We know that mistakes are inevitable. Growth is always possible.
Direct feedback is a gift. In CRCA, we combat liberalism. We put things on the table rather than beat around the bush. We strive for clarity in our communication and value principled, direct feedback and criticism for its relationship-building potential. You can reach us at crcainfo@gmail.com. Speak from your own experience. We're all here because we are struggling against white supremacy from the structural position of whiteness. We strive to name and own power and privilege dynamics when they surface in our group discussions, and to be transparent and politically conscious about where our experiences come from.
Thank you all. So if you're down to practice these norms with us today, please type agree in the chat. I'll take a look at those. I'm seeing a flood of agrees. A flood of agrees. Amazing. Agree times 2. Excellent. Thank you, John and Natasha. So I want to do a note about communicating during the webinar. So the first thing is that we are using auto captioning in Zoom that should be legible to all participants. So on your toolbar, which you also see on the screen, there should be a button that says live transcript. We'll also have those 2 letters CC. If you click on that button, it will allow you to show subtitles. If you're unable to see the auto captions, please let us know by sending a message to hosts and panelists. So we will be asking questions of y'all during the webinar. And so you will use the chat window to share your response. Again, just make sure it says everyone when you send. And a reminder to send a DM to hosts and panelists with any access needs you may have for today's webinar. We know that we're not taking any breaks and we have a lot of important content to cover, and we encourage everyone to do what you need to take care of yourself throughout the webinar. So, I'm seeing a note, and thank you so much for letting us know. We have a note in the chat. So I will not read the whole thing. Everybody is welcome here. And we note that CRC, a Black self-determination organization, has asked us to facilitate content that centers whiteness and is aimed at white people. That is our assignment. And we invite people to choose what feels right for you. But again, everyone is welcome, noting where we are directing and who has given us the direction to focus and center on whiteness and talk to white people. Thank you for asking, for being here. So, noting that we are here, you all signed up to come to a webinar to unpack issues of white nationalism, political violence, and free speech from an anti-racist lens. Our goal with this webinar is to give you some political clarity, but more importantly, to support you to take productive political action. This webinar will not dedicate space to speculation. We're not going to waste your time speculating about the potential political motives behind specific acts of violence that are still being investigated, especially with incomplete information provided by an authoritarian administration and the goofiest FBI director in American history. So if speculation is what you're looking for, just a note that that is not what we are here to do today. Before I pass it off, I do want to give a shout out to our whole team today who's helping to make this webinar possible, our facilitation team, Kaz, Kelsey, and Nicole, as well as Nikki, who does way more than back-end support. She makes this stuff happen. Thank you for holding down tech and access coordination. I appreciate all of you. And now I'm going to pass it off to Kaz.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Kaz. I am a white man with short blonde hair. I am wearing a flannel and a baseball cap, and I'm a volunteer with CRCA. I started organizing with CRCA in 2023 because I want to learn more about what my role as a white person could be in combating anti-Blackness and white supremacy. And I'm still organizing with CRCA because every time I participate with this organization, I learn a little bit more about what my role could look like. For those of you who are joining the CRCA space for the first time, welcome. We want to share a little bit about our organizational structure. CRCAA organizes people to practice the 5 methods to divest of white power and weaponize white privilege. But we can't talk about CRCA without making clear that we were created by and led by Community Ready Corps, CRC. CRC is a Black self-determination organization that is actively working on the ground in all disenfranchised communities, and in particular the Black community, to build capacity in 9 specific areas through their Black solidarity process and path to action. We'll hear more directly from CRC themselves briefly at the end of today's webinar, and you can read more about them by going to the link posted in the chat. CRC has tasked CRCA with the dual purpose of organizing other white people to fight white supremacy and supporting Black self-determination. Because CRC has explicitly asked this of us, all the content that we facilitate centers whiteness and is aimed at white people. CRC devised the 5 methods to divest of white power and weaponize white privilege as a set of protocols and parameters to structure their political relationship with white people in a way that does not compromise their commitment to Black self-determination. And as you can see on the slides, 5 methods are education, organization, contribution, not control, intervention, and divestment. The 5 methods are our guide to effective anti-racism. Today, we are focusing on the intervention method, which is about taking responsibility for preventing and addressing political violence against Black people. We'll share more at the end of this webinar about some opportunities we have to plug into the work and to learn more about the 5 methods. I'm going to pass it along to Kelsey.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kelsey. I am a blonde white woman wearing a Black sweatshirt, and I'm a volunteer with CRCA. I started organizing with CRCA in 2019 because I wanted to find my role in the movement, and I'm still organizing with CRCA today because what they do is effective, and it gives me hope that together we can win the fight against white supremacy. Speaking of, Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. once said, quote, "If you don't understand white supremacy, everything that you do understand will only confuse you," unquote. So we're going to start by grounding ourselves in an understanding of white supremacy and white nationalism. What is white supremacy? CRC defines white supremacy as the ideology that says European nations, their nation-state offspring, and white descendants should maintain power over the world's non-white majority. We're going to break this down a little bit more to deepen our understanding together. So what does CRC mean by ideology? Ideology is a system of ideas, especially ones which form the basis for a particular economic or political policy. So this doesn't have to be one specific idea. It's a whole system of ideas that work together. Next, we've got Europe's nation-state offspring. Examples of these include the USA, Israel, Australia, South Africa, Canada. You get the picture. We've got a whole system of ideas that are informing economic and political policies upheld by Europe and their nation-state offspring. And what is their ideology informed by? It's informed by a belief that the white minority from these European nations and their nation-state offspring should maintain power over the world's non-white majority. The word should here is pointing to the idea that it is right or natural or God-ordained for white people to have this power. What's important to consider here is the world is made up of a non-white majority. Only 16% of the world's population is white. We are a minority on the planet. In order to win monopoly power for a global minority, the system has to be inherently predatory. It's not fair. The whole point is to be unfair, unequal, and to make non-white people unfree. White supremacy necessitates political violence in order for the white minority to rule over the non-white majority. So let's get to the next definition. What is white nationalism? CRC defines white nationalism as a power system based on the ideology of white supremacy, the codification of white supremacy into policies and procedures to facilitate the ultimate objective of unchallenged white hegemonic power. This next slide features a black and white photo of Minister Huey P. Newton from the chest up in the bottom left corner. He's wearing a dark polo shirt and has his hands folded in front of him. So Minister Huey P. Newton, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party, said that power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. Next up, we have system. A system is an organized framework or method. It's a set of things working together to do a thing. So let's put this all together. White nationalism is the power system. It is the set of institutions working together to facilitate white power over the global non-white majority. Those institutions include local, state, and federal government, educational institutions, the media, the court system, the military, the police, the banking system, churches, hospitals. It's not one institution. It's a set of institutions that all work together to achieve this objective of white power. It is this power system that is upholding the ideology of white supremacy. All right, so to reiterate, white supremacy is the ideology, white nationalism is the power system. We also need to ground everyone today in the understanding that white nationalism and white supremacy are not a new phenomenon in this country. That in fact, America has always been a white nationalist project. European colonizers and enslavers were the original white nationalist movement. Europeans came over here to create a nation state that was by them and for them. This next slide features a black and white photo of John C. Calhoun in the bottom left corner. He is wearing an 1800s style suit. Let's hear it directly from the vice president to both John Adams and Andrew Jackson, John C. Calhoun, who said, quote, "We have never dreamed of incorporating into our nation any but the Caucasian race. Ours, sir, is the government of the white race, unquote. This next slide features, This next slide features a painting of white men who are mistreating Black men on a slave ship and the words, "America was founded on white supremacy." The white nationalist project that is the United States of America began with European colonizers wiping out the original inhabitants of this land, systematically murdering millions of indigenous people and kidnapping and enslaving millions of African people, torturing them and their children for hundreds of years for profit. Through this violent theft of land, people, and labor, the United States became the most powerful empire in the world. It took a lot of violence to make that happen, and it requires a lot of violence to maintain it. Violence is an essential feature of white nationalism, and that violence will keep happening until we white folks take responsibility for making it stop. That is what this webinar is about. And it's also why CRC asked us to do this training today, especially as it's on Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm passing it to Megan, who's going to speak more on that.
Thank you, Kelsey. So if we oppose political violence, it follows that we must oppose white nationalism, which, as Kelsey has detailed and I will talk about further, white nationalism is the most violent force in the history of this planet. So on Indigenous Peoples Day, we acknowledge that white nationalist violence and the devastating scale upon which the United States was founded. Between 1492 and 1600, European settlers killed 56 million Indigenous people across the Americas, wiping out 90% of the Indigenous population. And for clarity, those folks are still here, but we have robbed them of a great deal. Through the white nationalist institution of chattel slavery, we also see a devastating scale. 12.5 million Africans were forced onto slave ships. 10.5 million of those Africans survived to reach the Americas. If we include the generations who were born into slavery, at least 30 million people lived and died enslaved throughout the Americas between 1501 and 1888. And 37% of those 30 million people were enslaved in the United States. And then the Civil War. The United States went through the war largely over the question of chattel slavery. And historians estimate that between 600 and 700,000 white people died during that war. And we're highlighting that in particular to remember that white people are not exempt from becoming the targets of white nationalist violence. So I'm going to talk about two patterns. And the first one that's important to notice is that white nationalist violence always escalates dramatically in response to advances towards racial justice and Black self-determination. It's after the Civil War and the abolition of chattel slavery in the US, which we call the Reconstruction era, that's when we see the first wave of the KKK. The KKK engaged in armed guerrilla warfare against Black Americans. They killed thousands of Black Southerners during this period, including 35 out of the 265 Black politicians who were elected to office during Reconstruction. The second pattern I want to call our attention to is that white nationalists will almost always fabricate or exploit an incident that threatens a white person's safety as a pretext for engaging in massive, disproportionate violence against an entire community of people. Between 1865 and 1968, historians estimate that between 3,500 and 5,000 Black men were lynched in the US. And those lynchings were almost always, quote, justified by accusations of sexual assault, harassment, or some other alleged aggressive act towards a white person, often a white woman. And just want to really have folks pay attention that the response to this white nationalist violence by the Black community during that time was not to go on the offensive, engaging in similar attacks against white people, although indeed that is what white people fear. And yes, I'm seeing a note in the chat, yes. So it was not just Black men, it was Black women, Black children. So the Black community's response was actually to organize armed patrols to protect their communities. And that's where we want to name that there's a difference between violence and self-defense. And in the face of political violence, the right and the capacity to engage in self-defense is critical. Wait, we have so this slide features a Black and white photo of the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1918. So you can see on either side of the road, there are brick buildings and there are cars of that era. So if you aren't already familiar, in 1918, the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma was the wealthiest Black community in the country. And it was the closest thing to a self-determined Black community that this country had ever seen. But the white nationalist response to non-white people advancing themselves towards self-determination is always political violence. What became known as the Tulsa Race Massacre began in 1921 when a 19-year-old Black man who lived in the Black Wall Street district was accused, arrested, and jailed for allegedly assaulting a young white woman. So this next slide, this is a Black and white photo of that same Greenwood district after it was razed in 1921. You can see that a few buildings are standing and everything has been burned. So when this young Black man was released from jail, an angry white mob showed up to lynch him, and a group of 75 Black men, some of them armed, showed up to protect him. A white man attempted to disarm one of the Black men. A shot was fired and a fight ensued, resulting in the deaths of 2 Black men and 10 white men. Angry white mobs responded by looting and burning businesses and homes throughout the district, including using a privately owned aircraft to drop firebombs on buildings, homes, and fleeing families. In this moment, that sounds eerily familiar, right? So during the Tulsa Race Massacre, 150 Black people were murdered. Over 800 were admitted to hospitals for their injuries. Over 6,000 Black residents were interned in makeshift detention centers for several days. 10,000 Black residents were left homeless. And if we look at the 2019 figures, the property damage amounted to $32.25 million. And again, that's in 2019 units. The Black community's property was never restored, nor were they compensated for it in any way. At the time, this was the largest destruction of Black wealth that had ever occurred. And that would be until the foreclosure crisis in the 2000s. So these two patterns that we've talked about, one, that political violence is usually a response to Black people building self-determination, and two, that violence is, quote, justified in the eyes of the white community and the law by some pretextual incident, whether real or fabricated. A singular act of violence or perceived transgression against the white nationalist project is used to justify political violence against an entire community. We see these patterns over and over again. From 1951 to 1952, at least 40 homes were bombed by white nationalist terrorists in the South in response to Black families moving into white neighborhoods. In 1955, Emmett Till was murdered following a false accusation from a white woman who later confessed, and that's later is 5 decades later. She confessed that she made the whole thing up. And in the backlash to the civil rights movement, dozens of activists, mostly Black, but some white, were murdered as part of the backlash to the movement. But it was Black activists who are identified as, quote, potentially violent militants, surveilled, infiltrated, and assassinated by the US government during this era. Turha Ak of Community Ready Corps talks about how this country, this white nationalist system, killed Martin and Malcolm. He says, quote, "Violent or nonviolent, you can be sunshine and daisies all day. They will gun you down in these streets if your tactics are effectively pushing back," unquote. Because the state will not tolerate effective Black leadership that builds towards Black self-determination. And it doesn't matter what tactic that leadership is using. State violence is, of course, also a form of political violence and a very important tactic in the arsenal of the white nationalist movement in the United States. So, in case it isn't already clear to you, we oppose political violence, and we make the distinction between violence and self-defense. I'll say that again. We make the distinction between violence and self-defense. We unequivocally oppose political violence, which is why we oppose white nationalism, mass deportations, police brutality, and the genocide in Gaza, because that's what a consistent, coherent position against political violence looks like. And if you are against political violence, you have to be against all political violence, no matter who is doing it, including and quite specifically when your own government is doing it. So we find ourselves in this moment. And as a white person, it has been interesting to watch how many white people on the left are responding to Charlie Kirk's assassination. So many white liberals seem far more vocally troubled in response to this one white man being killed than they have been by more than 67,000 Palestinians who've been killed with our tax dollars over the last 2 years. Because is that not political violence? It is important to notice these contradictions because white supremacy has shaped us neurologically. So it shapes how we react to things. But one of the most amazing things about the human brain is that it can be restructured and rewired. It can adapt and change. And all of us, we are fully capable of that. And the first step, and I'm speaking directly to white folks on this call, the first step is awareness. Maybe you feel panicked watching a white man being shot on a college campus, but you also notice that you scroll right past images of Palestinians being bombed on a daily basis. So when we notice that contradiction, we can ask ourselves and we can ask others questions with compassion. Like, why am I reacting so differently to these two situations? And what do my different reactions tell me about my lived values? To begin to question those things for yourself and with others. This is how we change. So this last slide features a black and white photo from the site of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Shows a pop-up tent and barricades that say the American Comeback Tour. So we oppose political violence because as anti-racist organizers, we are working to advance the politics of nurturance and care, not dominance and violence, because it's not effective. And now I'm gonna pass the mic to Nicole to talk about what is effective.
Thanks, Megan. Hey, everybody. My name is Nicole, and I'm a founding core member of CRCA. I got involved because white supremacy and anti-Blackness have always really bothered me, and CRC told me that there was something I could actually do about it. I've stayed committed to this organization over the last 11 years because it works. CRC's political frameworks and strategies of change actually work when we apply them in the real world, and I got hooked on that effectiveness. I like stopping evictions, I like winning elections, I like changing material conditions, I like kicking neo-Nazis out of my town. Those are the results that we get when we engage in this strategy of change, so I'm sticking with CRC. CRC teaches us that it's not enough to be right. We have to be effective. I'm going to say that again. It is not enough to be right. We have to be effective. It's not enough to be self-righteous and morally superior. And what that can sound like on the left is, I'm so against white nationalism that I support violence against white nationalists. We're going to explain why that's not effective given our concrete conditions in the United States. So this slide features a black and white photo of Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. with other members of the Rainbow Coalition seated at a table. Put something in the chat if you're familiar with Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. This man was an important leader in the Black Panther Party. He created the original Rainbow Coalition that united working class Black, Puerto Rican, and white people to fight oppression together. And he was one of many Black leaders who were assassinated by the US government in the 1960s. Chairman Fred said, quote, "We don't think you fight fire with fire best. We think we fight fire with water best. We're going to fight racism not with racism, but we're going to fight it with solidarity." The most effective way to fight political violence is with mass, broad-based, big tent, free frozen custard for everybody who hates fascism, like mass political organizing. The tactic of political violence undermines our ability to do that organizing. That's what the historical record reflects. The power is in the people. The people are the prize, and you can't move faster than the people. So here's a video of Chairman Fred Hampton speaking very, very clearly to this principle about 6 weeks before he was assassinated.
Fred, where does the Black Panther Party stand concerning the Weathermen, the SDS?
We stand way back. We think it is anarchistic, opportunistic, individualistic, it's chauvinistic, it's custoristic, and that's the bad part about it. It's custoristic in that its leaders take people into situations where the people can be massacred, and they call that revolution. And it's nothing but child's play, it's folly, because the people are not ready for confrontation. These confrontations that they have are premature. They're politically premature, and they're wrong because they commit people in a situation which they're not anywhere prepared for. And it's criminal because people can be hurt. We say that they're doing exactly what the pigs want them to do. When they take people down and just do nothing, play around, and the pigs are prepared for this, and they'll wipe all of those young people out. We think these people may be sincere, but they're misguided, they're muddleheads, and they're scatterbrains. And we don't support that because we'd say all power to the people. All the power is manifested in the people. We don't have any people whose lives we believe that should be thrown away.
I love that sentiment. We don't believe that we have any people whose lives should be thrown away. And I just want to highlight the contradiction that this was like one of the most prominent and most like the most radical credibility you could have. Like he was a gun-toting Black Panther, right? And he was on the news telling white radicals to chill out with fighting the police and bombing government buildings. And the government killed him. Wild. He says a lot in that clip, but there's a thing we want to lift up in terms of like, he talks about the people being unprepared for confrontation. We should all understand that there's over 391 million firearms owned by civilians in the United States, and 50% of those weapons are owned by 3% of the population. Guess who that 3% is? Who's the 3% that's been stockpiling these weapons? It's white men who subscribe to white nationalist ideologies. They have been stockpiling weapons for decades. So engaging in counter violence, like attempting to use political violence to defeat this particular enemy, would be deeply unstrategic because we're outgunned. Like we are not going to defeat this movement militarily. We're going to defeat it through organizing. We have to fight fire with water. We do need to build up the capacity of targeted communities to defend themselves. The communities that are targeted by the white nationalist movement are underdeveloped in this regard relative to the threat. But even as we support building the capacity for self-defense, we do not view offensive political violence as an appropriate or effective tactic. We know from experience that the most effective way to overcome and defeat fascist political violence is through broad, mass-based organizing. I'm going to say it over and over because if you walk away tonight with one thing, broad, mass-based organizing. The best defense is a competent, coordinated mass. And I'm going to tell you a true story about what that looks like. In 2017, I had to take my very cool, very tough, very militant anarchist friend to the hospital because the Proud Boys cracked his head open during a street fight in Berkeley. And while we were in the hospital, the Proud Boys were vandalizing Black and immigrant-owned businesses. Their neo-Nazi friends were spray painting swastikas around the Berkeley Jewish Community Center. Their whole fascist coalition was engaging in a campaign of harassment and intimidation against all the different kinds of people that fascists seek to dominate. Black people, immigrants, trans and queer people, women, Jews, like lots of people, right? And instead of stopping any of that criminal activity, the police were working with the online alt-right to identify anti-fascist activists, to raid their homes and arrest them. And on the news, the headlines were "Violent Leftists Attack Free Speech in Berkeley." It was truly surreal how slanted and warped the media narrative was. We were up against a lot of overwhelming forces. Kind of reminds me of how it feels right now. This slide features a free speech rally, quote unquote, attended by lots of white men in helmets because they weren't really there for speech. One of the posters features Pepe the Frog with the words "Green Lives Matter" and "Pepe the Frog is an alt-right meme." The right had been organizing these free speech rallies at UC Berkeley, which is the birthplace of the free speech movement, and it's a place that epitomizes liberal academia in the public imagination. These events brought in speakers who were advocating for extreme white nationalist policies, such as the mass deportations, like the ones we're seeing right now, right? Advocacy becomes policy. They were also advocating for things like the death penalty for abortion patients, things like that. The goal of these events was to create spectacles of conflict that would depict white nationalist activists as victims of censorship and depict leftists as violent and intolerant, so that social justice activists would be isolated from liberal and moderate allies. The reality was that actual neo-Nazi organizations, like groups with the explicit goal of remaking the United States as a white ethno-state where only white cisgender men have full rights of citizenship, those groups were using the Berkeley College Republicans as a front group to advance their political goals. This next slide features a photo from the United Against Hate rally. People are holding signs that read "Resist" and "Bay Area Against Hate." What ultimately led to those fascist organizations being run out of the East Bay was, can you guess? Mass, broad-based, big tent, political organizing, led largely in part by Community Ready Corps. CRC and their anti-fascist coalition partners organized town halls, like at the Berkeley Jewish Community Center. They call these town halls United Against Hate. They specifically reached out to the people who were buying this media narrative that this was a free speech issue and the left was going too far and the left was becoming violent. They reached across that divide instead of furthering that divide. So they didn't say, you liberals are why the fascists are going to win. They organized the liberals so that the fascists didn't win. It's not enough to be right. We have to be effective. It only benefits our opposition when we're fighting with each other instead of building with each other to oppose their hateful ideology. And that goes both ways. So for those of us who find ourselves on the more moderate or liberal side of the anti-fascist spectrum, we cannot afford to waste time fighting people to our left instead of uniting with them against white nationalism. CRC used this town hall and the Know Your Nazi campaign to educate the public, exposing how the Berkeley College Republicans had been infiltrated and co-opted by neo-Nazi activists. We showed videos that showed the 255 people killed by the white nationalist movement over the previous 25 years, highlighting how serious the fascist threat is and why it's necessary to deplatform white nationalist activists. It's pretty staggering when you really look at the body counts. It's not that nobody on the left has ever engaged in any form of political violence, but it's just not anywhere near close to being on the same scale as what the right has done. They have killed a lot of people. They've killed a lot of police officers. People don't know this, but like 42% of right-wing terrorist attacks in those 25 years were anti-government attacks that targeted police officers and other government personnel. The only group targeted for assassination by the right more than law enforcement is Black people. So this narrative that political violence is a serious problem on the left is nonsense. It is not based in reality, but it's a very deliberate narrative, especially right now. In March of this year, the Trump administration cut funding for a national database that tracks domestic terrorism, hate crimes, and school shootings. That database was publicly accessible, and it was used by researchers to map incidents of political violence. Trump took that down. He also took down research that reported that far-right extremists have killed more Americans than any other domestic terror group since 1990. All of that data is now gone from the Department of Justice website. So free speech is an issue that white nationalists have exploited, but it is not a value that white nationalists actually hold. As soon as they get into power, they start censoring information that works against their agenda and silencing people who push back on them. So for example, Trump issued this executive order entitled Restoring Freedom of Speech and Ending Federal Censorship, then immediately took steps to censor free speech by weaponizing the FCC, challenging ABC, CBS, and NBC's coverage of the 2024 election, and then opening up more investigations challenging other news stations' licenses to operate, which can really have the effect of deterring the press from coverage that the administration might dislike. This slide features a screenshot of the Professor Watchlist website and a screenshot of an email that was sent to a professor at UC Riverside that I'm not going to read out loud. Turning Point USA claims to promote free speech by bringing white nationalist speakers to college campuses. But they also run this Professor Watchlist that mobilizes targeted harassment against academics who they say promote quote unquote anti-American values. Who is familiar with the term DARVO? DARVO, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. This is an acronym that describes a common manipulative response pattern used by perpetrators of abuse or oppression when they're confronted or held accountable. So the perpetrator denies that the harm has occurred or minimizes its significance. They then attack the credibility, the motives, or the character of the person accusing them. And they try to flip the narrative, claiming that they are the true victim of false accusations or persecution or cancel culture or whatever. DARVO is a central white nationalist strategy. You see them use it over and over and over again. Like a narcissistic abuser, their accusations are confessions. So they accuse the left of suppressing free speech while organizing campaigns to silence people with social justice politics. They accuse the left of political violence while they bomb government buildings and abortion clinics, facilitate online radicalization pipelines that create mass shooters who target marginalized communities. They storm the Capitol, try to overturn elections, right? There are so many examples that we could give of this. So when you see DARVO, recognize it and call it out for what it is. Do not let them switch the narrative. White nationalists act as the aggressors, and then they fabricate and or exploit their target's response to justify political violence that advances their political goals. So that's what the free speech rally tactic was all about. Send in these white nationalist speakers advocating for political violence against Black people, immigrants, queer and trans people, women, Jewish people. Provoke a reaction from those people and then use that reaction to mobilize state violence against those same targeted groups and their allies on the left. So the strategy that worked to defeat this tactic in Berkeley in 2017 was exposing the DARVO tactic, focusing the public's attention on the actual evidence of a serious problem with political violence on the right instead of this disingenuous framing of free speech, bringing together all of the different groups targeted by the right to turn out by the thousands for a United Against Hate counter rally. Big, mass, broad-based organizing, power in numbers. Another really key component of this strategy was practicing disciplined community defense and pushing back on attempts to criminalize that defense. I want to end this section by saying that when we are effective, we're not letting personalities distract us from the power system. Political violence against a personality does not adequately address the power system. Only organizing can do that. Charlie Kirk was never really our problem. Our real problem was the $400 million of dark money that wealthy donors invested in Turning Point USA, and the fact that Turning Point USA was using that money to hire hundreds of full-time employees to recruit hundreds of thousands of young people to the MAGA movement. That's a problem. The real problem is that we are not investing in organizing on that scale on the left. That's a problem, and that's a problem we can do something about. It's the absence of serious organizing on that scale that leads some young people to believe that nothing can be done to change the bad things that are happening and start to see political violence as the only option. The most effective antidote to that is organizing, and it needs to be invested in. Now I'm going to pass it to Kaz and Kelsey.
Thank you so much for all of that wonderful education, Nicole. Now we're going to turn our attention back to CRC's Guide to Effective White Anti-Racism, the 5 methods to divest of white power and weaponize white privilege. So we don't have the time to dive into all 5 methods in this webinar, but we are launching a 5-method study group, which we encourage all of you to sign up for, and the link will be posted in the chat. Today, we're going to be focusing on the method of intervention, taking responsibility for preventing harm against targeted communities. So why intervention? CRC says that violence is an essential feature of white nationalism, and that violence will keep happening until we make it stop. White people must take responsibility for putting an end to America's culture of racist violence. That's our job, not anybody else's. Stopping this violence is on us as white people. CRC has 3 principles for effective intervention. Principle 1, prevention is the best intervention. CRC emphasizes that proactivity is always better than reactivity. We can't wait for the next incident of political violence to get serious about organizing to defeat white nationalism, which is the most violent political force on planet Earth. In a few minutes, we're going to lay out a menu of options, ways that you can get actively involved in advancing CRC's strategy to end white supremacy and build Black self-determination. Our ask is that you sign up for at least one thing tonight, to stay in motion with us so we can build momentum and get out of that reactive mode of responding to each political crisis as it arises. Principle 2, do something, not nothing. Every style can work. The intervention method is an invitation for white people to move from passivity to activity in regards to fighting white supremacy. Intervention is political, not just physical, and there are opportunities to take action against racism in big and small ways every single day. White supremacy is everywhere, and there is value in fighting it everywhere that it exists. Practice intervention in ways that make sense for your context, whether that's participating in civil disobedience or pushing back on a racist joke at the family dinner table. The important thing is to keep practicing and to normalize pushback against white supremacy among white people. Each of the 5 methods is in its own way a form of intervention, and when practiced, these methods are useful tools to prevent racist harm, whatever your personal temperament or political tendency.
Principle 3. Effective intervention requires discipline and discernment. Intervention can be risky because it has both the potential to prevent and to cause harm. We need to understand the risks, not just to ourselves, but to others. We ask ourselves the following questions when engaging in the intervention method. Will our intervention create real protection, or will it create the conditions for more racist harm? Is our intervention really about preventing and addressing harm, or is it a way to satisfy an emotional need of ours? And who are we accountable to? What we said at the beginning of this webinar, we're going to say again. CRC and CRCA unequivocally oppose political violence. We're not going to speculate about the potential motives behind the Charlie Kirk assassination. We do not know for sure who was behind this and what their motives were. And amidst the speculation that is out there, one that we want to address is that Charlie Kirk's murder was an attempt at an anti-racist intervention. For the purposes of understanding the intervention method, we're going to do a thought exercise on this claim. To be clear, we do not sign on to this speculation, but let's still think this through. If the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a white nationalist organizer, was an anti-racist intervention, how would we evaluate the effectiveness of that intervention according to this principle? Did this hypothetical intervention create real protection, or did it create the conditions for more racist harm? What were the concrete results of this assassination? Who benefited? Who was harmed? What do you all think? Let us know in the chat. Seeing a few responses coming through, saying this caused more harm. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of comments indicating more harm. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Yeah, there's good discussion happening in the chat. I'm not going to read every response out loud. We want to be mindful of not creating opportunities for our position to be misconstrued, and don't want anything to be taken out of context and potentially used against CRC, because we're working on effectiveness in our interventions. And I appreciate all of your responses. We do want to highlight some concrete outcomes that happened in the aftermath of this incident that did not advance the cause of racial justice. So here's just a short list of things that happened after the Charlie Kirk assassination. Within just 24 hours after Kirk's death, Black students across the US were targeted with coordinated racist death threats, forcing at least 7 HBCUs into emergency lockdowns. 5 days later, DeMartravion Trey Reed, 21 years old, Black, not even a month into his freshman year of college, was found hanging from a fruit tree on the campus of Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi. Campus police were quick to rule the death a suicide, but his parents say that just days before his body was found, he showed no signs of mental distress, and they, along with many students on campus, strongly suspect that this was not a suicide, but a lynching. Also, the Texas Attorney General announced that his office will launch undercover operations targeting what he calls, quote unquote, radical leftist organizations, including, quote, Antifa, after the Charlie Kirk assassination. The announcement frames leftist and transgender rights groups together as threats and suggests these groups will be surveilled or infiltrated. Since the assassination, President Trump issued an executive order designating Antifa as a, quote, domestic terrorist organization, unquote, thereby ratcheting up the legal and rhetorical tools available for repression. He also directed the administration to crack down on what is described as, quote, left-wing terrorism, naming certain Democratic donors and organizations, signaling state-level targeting of left-leaning nonprofits or activists. And finally, over $6 million have been donated to Turning Point USA in Kirk's honor, creating more organizing capacity for the white nationalist movement. So it's important to ask ourselves these questions as we take action to intervene against the white nationalist movement. Remember, it's not enough to be right. We have to be effective. I'm passing it back to Nicole.
Right on, Kelsey. Thank you. So speaking of effectiveness, I want to take some time to tell you a bit more about our leadership, Community Ready Corps. Community Ready Corps is a Black self-determination organization based here in Oakland, California. And we're saying Black self-determination because that's the language that CRC uses to talk about themselves. BIPOC is a term that stands for Black and Indigenous people of color. It's an umbrella term that focuses on uniting folks of the global majority while also still lifting up the centrality of anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity, if I can say that correctly. It's not the language that CRC uses to talk about their organizing, not because they oppose it, but because the purpose of CRC is to nurture Black self-determination, to heal and transform anti-Blackness, which they feel like is worth doing and worth having an organization that's dedicated to that. And I agree. The other thing I want to speak to is there was a question in the chat about this weekend's protests. I'm going to demonstrate some anti-racist discipline by not answering your question. because everything that we've shared tonight has actually been asked for and approved by CRC leadership. That's the structure of CRCA. We are actually carrying out very clear directives from Black leadership, and they didn't ask us to speak on that event. So I'm not going to speak to it. I'm just going to reiterate that mass, broad-based, big tent organizing is what works against white nationalism. So back to CRC. CRC builds power in the Black community and across all oppressed communities by developing concrete capacity in what they call the 9 areas of self-determination. So those areas are self-defense and safety, economics and prosperity, education and competence, family systems and stability, traditions and ways, technology and efficacy, art and media, politics and governance, and health and well-being. So CRC doesn't just respond to crises. They build infrastructure for self-determined communities. They are organizers, trainers, builders, and protectors. When there's a crisis, like a hate crime or an act of political violence or an unfair eviction, CRC is there on the ground as a first responder, but they are just as focused on the long-term work, creating systems that make communities strong, safe, and self-determined. And I'll share one example of how this organization is working to end violence and create a culture of safety and stability in their community. In February of last year, CRC helped organize an effort to redirect City of Oakland resources away from punitive policing, investing those resources instead in violence prevention programs that the data shows are a lot more effective at lowering rates of violent crime. At the same time, CRC's Black Solidarity Fund invested in some complementary independent violence preventers who were emerging organically here in Oakland, helped them set up their own nonprofit, gave them grants to pay themselves and rent a space and give stipends to the young people that they work with. 8 months later, there were 0 homicides in Oakland for 45 days in a row, which is the longest stretch that Oakland has had without homicides in about 30 years. And this was with the fewest number of cops on the streets at the same time. And this trend has continued. Overall, crime in Oakland was down 28% in the first 6 months of 2025 compared to the previous year. So that's one example of the kind of impact that CRC leadership makes, making this community safer for everybody. This slide features a photo of CRC's garbage truck and members of CRC under a freeway overpass during a cleanup. CRC is out on the ground every weekend, contributing to people's material needs in the most disenfranchised and violent neighborhoods, giving out groceries, clothing, hygiene kits, putting gas in people's cars, cleaning up illegal dumping, supporting people who are living in encampments. CRC's strategy of change is called the contribution continuum. In a nutshell, their strategy is to build relationships by meeting people's material needs. They say that if you can't feed the people, you can't lead the people. So we're going to show a video that shows a little bit of the love that they bring to the community here in Oakland and how they're starting to branch out around the country, bringing this work to Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and even Jamaica.
Thanks for giving back to the community.
We out here in the East today, so for the next 2 weeks we out in the East. Man, it's beautiful to be out here with our people, period, point blank. It's love. Places they say we can't have love. We can't have, it's love every time, right? Even when it's issues, we work through it with love every time. Even when it's issues, right? We able to resolve it and get through it. Love, right? We all we got. We say shit, we got a lot though.
Thank you, CRC. This is very awesome. I appreciate it. The neighborhood needs stuff like this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Thank you, good brothers, thank you. We love what y'all doing for the community. Keep up the good work.
Even I'll tell people, man, even if you got money in your pocket, man, come down here and get it, man. It's a blessing. There's some people that can't do it, you know? So, you know, it's a blessing from God.
See?
God's blessing. Yeah.
This is what we're talking about. Community. So we came out, we done 50. The owner comes and say they're gonna do 20 more. Man, that's what it's about, right? We got us. Period, point blank. We appreciate
In the future, whenever I'm there.
Come on, man, that's why I came. Yeah, come on, come on.
So we back at it again. This time, we're kicking off our national tour. But CRC is spearheading events in Jamaica, Oakland, and Cleveland. But we are moving on our first leg through the Midwest.
Thing is beautiful. Yesterday at Liquor Store, bought a scratch out. I had a winner. I ain't go buy no another one from Liquor Store. I'm coming to the gas station, bought another winner. Then I saw you, the real winner.
Prepare, put the extra hours into preparing. The event will go smooth. So, got some good help out here. Everybody's playing their part. It's beautiful. A beautiful thing.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Muskegon Heights, Michigan. We all we got. Detroit, Michigan. We all we got.
We all we got.
We all we got. We got to stick together somehow.
I promise you, the work that we're doing today will set seeds in somebody else being served today, and there'll be a benefit to somebody else tomorrow. All powerful people.
We say we all we got, when we say shit, we got a lot, that's why we got us. We love y'all.
Love CRC, man. It gets me every time. And if you're like, why are we showing this video of this very positive, warm, fuzzy, feel-good organizing that CRC is doing at the end of a webinar about these dark topics of white nationalism and political violence? It's because that's the antidote. The solution looks nothing like the problem. The solution looks like this. And this is what we want to focus on. We want to redirect people's attention to positive work that makes things better. So that's CRC. They do that better than everyone. And every single thing that we've talked about white nationalism, about political violence and effective intervention, we learned this from CRC's analysis and leadership. So the reason that we as CRCA do this work in the way that we do it, with discipline, with strategy, and with a lot of love, is because CRC taught us how. They've shown us that we can't just be against something. We have to be for something. So, you know, we started as anti-fascists and anti-racists, and now we're that, and we're also fighting for a better world and doing positive things in the community. We are building power, not just reacting to harm. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my fellow organizers so we can tell you how you can get involved in this.
Thanks, Nicole. Yes, we have lots of things for you, but before we get into the different ways you can continue to organize with us, please, we believe that direct feedback is a gift, so we would love your feedback on this workshop. Please take a few minutes to complete our short evaluation form, which just got dropped in the chat. You can complete it now while we're going over these opportunities, or do it shortly after. We appreciate any feedback you can share. Thank you. Yeah, if you were as moved as I'm feeling right now by anything you heard tonight, we're asking you to stay in motion with us. If you want more of that political education, please join the 5 Methods study group. If you're a white person and you want to deepen your anti-racist practice for the fight against white nationalism, join CRCA for a virtual 6-part reading group on the 5 methods to divest of white power and weaponize white privilege. So the 5 methods, again, they're education, organization, intervention, which we covered tonight, contribution, not control, and divestment. They were created by CRC for white anti-racists so that wherever we find ourselves, we can strategically contribute to the movement to end white nationalism. So there'll be readings that are curated by CRC, and the discussion will be guided by CRCA volunteers. This reading group offers a facilitated deep dive into how we can incorporate the 5 methods into our lives, our work, and our organizing. This cohort's going to meet on Zoom on Wednesday evenings starting next week. So Wednesday, October 22nd. The registration link should be in the chat right now. Yes. So who can join us for the 5 Methods study group? You ready for more? All right, we have the CRCA Debate Club. So this is an online space where we're supporting white anti-racists to effectively contend with and contest white nationalist ideas. White nationalists are organizing in white communities, and it's not enough to just say, those people are racist, you shouldn't listen to them. We need to be able to defeat their arguments. So think of this as the CRCA Debate Club as a gym for building your intervention muscles. We are powerlifting for justice in this space. So each month, we're going to have debate role plays to challenge white nationalist ideas that are catching on in white communities and to argue effectively for anti-racist ideas. So this is an exercise we've done in CRCA in the past and had a lot of fun with. I would know, I've been. It was very eye-opening. And I was very humbled by Nicole. I was on the speech side of the speech and debate club in high school, so now I'm really strengthening those debate skills as an adult. And I think those of us who've practiced in these role plays have all really grown a lot, and we've become more skilled at articulating anti-racist logic effectively through doing these role plays together. So we really hope you can join us there too. The debate club will meet on Zoom on the third Thursday of every month, starting next month, so November 20th. We hope to see you there. Passing it to Megan.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see folks saying that they're bringing friends with them. And I'm going to talk about, so if you live in the Bay Area, so you just saw the garbage truck and CRC's cleanups. If you live in the Bay, you can join CRC's Good Neighbor Community Cleanup. The next one is next Saturday, or this coming Saturday, October 18th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We're going to be meeting at San Pablo and West Grand and West Oakland. So I have joined so many Good Neighbor cleanups. I feel incredibly lucky to be able to live in the Bay and to witness CRC's work up close and personal, because the cleanups are a concrete way to contribute directly to change and to build community at the same time. I have walked away with new friends and deepened relationships. So if you aren't from the Bay or you aren't familiar, Oakland is suffering from a homelessness crisis. There are over 6,000 people living on the streets in the city, and 7 out of 10 of those folks are Black, because the housing market is one of the institutions that uphold white supremacy and white nationalism. The Good Neighbor program is an initiative led by CRC to partner with the unhoused community to clean up and to organize existing encampments. So while we believe that everyone deserves safe and secure housing, we also recognize that not everyone has that right now. So while we support the fight to house everyone, we are also showing up in the meantime. So we are cleaning and organizing existing encampments, supporting dignity and safety in place, and building unity between the housed and the unhoused. The right has poured millions of dollars into establishing a narrative that homelessness is a, quote, human problem, not a housing problem, unquote. They play on fears about homelessness to recruit people to the alt-right. We say, oh no, because CRC is disrupting that strategy by building community between renters, homeowners, and unhoused neighbors, reminding folks that we have a lot more in common with each other than we do with the people who profit from this crisis. So again, if you're local to the Bay Area, you can join us next Saturday, and the registration link is in the chat. Thank you, Nikki. Next up is practice contribution. So again, if you're local to the Bay Area and you're interested in plugging into some of the behind the scenes work, we would love your help putting together the kits that CRC gives away in the community. These are PPE kits, hygiene and sock packs, and fresh produce. If you haven't been in a line packing produce for hours on a Sunday, what are you doing with your life? It's amazing. And again, another way to build community while contributing. Kit assembly shifts take place in Oakland once a week, Sundays from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. You can volunteer one time or you can volunteer regularly. I lean on regularly, weekly, bi-weekly, come through and contribute. We do follow COVID safety protocols, and the link again is in the chat. And yes, kit making shifts are indeed the best. Now pass to Kaz.
Last but not least, we want to invite all of you to give to the Black Solidarity Fund, which supports CRC's work building self-determination in all 9 areas. We just put the link in the chat. Please give what you can. Everything you learned in this free workshop comes from CRC's intellectual and political labor. So please, let's give back to these amazing Black leaders who give so much to us, to the community, and to the movement. You can make a one-time donation, or you can join the hundreds of allies who donate every month to sustain this beautiful and important work. I actually am one of those monthly donors, and it's really wonderful to see all the great work CRC does with these contributions. If you can, I encourage you to join me in divesting. You can also get plugged into CRC's work and follow the work of CRC on social media, namely Facebook and Instagram. As someone who's a monthly sustainer, but who also doesn't live in the Bay Area, I love following CRC to see all the great work they're doing on the ground in Oakland and in the Bay. It makes me feel like I'm there even when I can't physically be present. Okay, that was a lot of information. So we'll put a document in the chat that includes all of the links we just shared with you today, plus a few more that we didn't mention just now, so you don't have to remember it all. If you have any further feedback or questions for us, please feel free to email us at crcainfo@gmail.com. And just a reminder that these methods come from Community Ready Corps, so please be sure to always give them credit whenever talking about these methods. Also remember that the methods are a practice, not a checklist. So as a closeout practice, we'd love to hear from you in the chat about one thing you're taking away with you from today's webinar. Let's see those chat responses. Yeah, broad mass-based organizing. Custard, exactly. Darbo's a big one, exactly. Prevention is the best intervention. We got to be effective. These are all really, really good. It sounds like you all really were here for this. People are the prize. Understanding white supremacy is super important. Yes, yes. Thank you, everybody. We are so grateful that you were here tonight, and we are thrilled to have connected with you for this time, and we look forward to organizing more with you moving ahead in the future. Thank you so much, everyone.